Welcome to the Mindful CIO Podcast, where we explore the human side of tech leadership and what it takes to mindfully and sustainably lead high-performing tech teams. Hello, I'm your host, Nathalie Heynderickx, executive coach, leadership facilitator, and founder of the Mindful CIO community. In today's episode, I'm joined by Adam Carthew, Chief Information Officer at Service Victoria and one of Australia's top 50 CIOs. Adam brings a unique perspective, having held senior leadership roles across both the private and public sectors, including ANZ, Coast Financial Services, and Target Australia. In this wide-ranging conversation, Adam shares his personal transformation from a solution-focused architect to a human-centered tech leader. We talk about building trust through diversity of thought, managing up and down, the power of coaching, humility, and letting go of ego. He also speaks candidly about leading during moments of crisis, the challenges of responsible AI adoption in government, and the joy of seeing future leaders grow. And don't miss his powerful leadership metaphor, drawing on the stinks of a Maremma dog to illustrate values-driven leadership grounded in trust-based relationships. It's one of the most memorable moments we had on the podcast. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Mindful CIO Podcast, where we explore the human side of tech leadership. Today, we have the pleasure of be talking to Adam Carthew. Adam is the Chief Information Officer at Service Victoria. Service Victoria is transforming the way public sector agencies interact with citizens by creating new digital channels to make it faster and easier to get things done with government. Adam is an experienced IT professional with executive management experience in large IT and architecture teams, with a strong focus on strategy and outcomes. Adam brings extensive industry experience to Service Victoria with previous technology executive roles at ANZ, heading up architecture functions, as well as delivering and managing retail platforms. At Coast Financial Services, he helped guide the customer technology direction of the emerging business. His previous role was at Target Australia within the Kmart Group. And last but not least, in 2021 to 2023, Adam was selected in the top 50 CIOs in Australia. So it's an absolute pleasure and honor to have Adam here today. So thanks, Adam. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. I'm happy to be here, Nat. Good to see you.
Wonderful. Lovely. So let's get started, Adam. We heard, a brief version of your bio. It would be good to hear from you something that listeners cannot, find on LinkedIn, a personal fact or, interesting fact, anything that you feel comfortable to share about Adam.
Yeah. Look, I started as a graduate many, many years ago at ANZ and worked my way up from there to be an executive. But I think a lot of the best thing I ever did for my career was I took 2 years off university and went and did missionary work and got out and actually faced the world as a 19-year-old and went out and focused on other people and learned how to be a leader, learned how to help people. You won't see that on my LinkedIn bio, but I think for my career, they were the most important 2 years that I've done that have helped set me up for the rest of my career.
Wow, that's remarkable. Amazing. Thanks for sharing. It's always fascinating when I ask this question, what get speakers will bring up. Shifting gears to look into the Mindful CIO Manifesto. Of course, now the Mindful CIO community, the Mindful CIO Podcast is really rooted in the Mindful CIO Manifesto. And we had the original one, 1.0, and the more recent one, 2.0. So out of those two, are there any principles or declarations that you resonate the most with? At all?
Yeah, I mean, I can see why you consolidated them to have 2.0, because there were a lot in the first one that had crossover, I guess, around how do you lead people, how do you develop people, diversity of thought, helping people feel safe in the workplace, all those sorts of things. The world's changed over the last 20 years, especially leading teams has changed as well. So I resonate really well with a lot in the first one, but I can see why you consolidated it. And as I've gotten older, I've seen the value of it being able to use diversity and different thinking in my leadership style and in supporting me as a leader. And so that's one of the ones I really liked in 2.0. I do have minimum standards of capability and ability, but you should bring people around you who can think differently and then help you develop them and help develop you. And so that really resonated with me, especially as I'm getting older and potentially more set in my ways. It's more important that I get people around me who challenge that and enable them to grow and develop and trust that they're going to do a good job thinking differently. So that really resonated with me as I think about those kind of principles.
Wonderful. Older and wiser, Adam. We like to think, right? I'm getting my gray on as well. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
hopefully looking wiser. Yeah, and yeah, you touched on diversity. And remember when we had our previous chat, you mentioned, something around the lines of looking for people with a perspective different than mine, so I can actually, have a different point of view, and perhaps uncover blind spots. So it sounds like, yeah, diversity is something that it's really important to you.
yeah, it is. And it's just in different ways of looking at things, right? Because not when you look at something a lot yourself, you can kind of become blind to the other side. And I've found having people in my leadership team who think differently, have different strengths and different preferences to how they think, has been really valuable because I have so many blind spots and it's great for them to tell you. And it's also humbling and you can be taught. So, and the organization benefits from it and you benefit from it. So that's something that I've found really important. Um, Now that you've got to be looking in the same direction in terms of what's the common goals for diversity to work, but you've got to be open to a different perspective on that direction. And that's something that I've found really insightful and really helpful. It's helped me develop better as a leader as well. Yeah, and that way you can also get those people to help own the outcome, which is that helps you get a much higher performing team.
Fantastic. So talking about, development as a leader, and blind spots and not knowing what we don't know, right? You shared with me when we spoke earlier that, about your self-discovery version, story or journey, and how when you promote in the early days, as the go-to person, the solution architect who has all the answers to, oh, hey, I'm leading people now, in the shift. So yeah, it would be good to hear if you have any comments or what would you like to share around that experience and how did you go with your own development?
Yeah, there was a period of time at ANZ when I was pretty well regarded in leading architecture. And the thing about architects, they all think that they're the smartest guy in the room, and I was no different. And I would go up and what I would say, I'd expect people to listen to and go, oh, yeah, he's right. He's the man. He knows what he's talking about. And then they took me and moved me out of architecture and put me into a head of delivery role when nobody cared about my opinion. They cared about my outcomes. And so that was a really tough thing for me because the same person that I was giving advice to before, I was now reporting to differently in a different context. And I could see that they didn't care about my opinion on things. They just wanted to report and make sure I was getting stuff done and remove their problems. So it got to a point where I remember that person saying to me, I think I've over promoted you. I've got to do something or I'm going to get rid of you. And that was after being lauded as this smart architect. And then suddenly I'm on the way out. And thankfully they invested some time in me. They got me some coaching. And the coaching didn't change my performance in terms of outputs, but it helped me understand how to tell the story differently, to not get my self-value from me being the man and saying all the stuff. It's actually how do I help the organization move forward and help my managers and leaders be successful at what they do and deliver what I need to deliver. And it changed my kind of center of gravity in terms of what's important. It didn't matter what I thought and that I was recognized as being the one who knew stuff. It was actually how do I get things done and help people around me do that. And so that was a really important lesson for me. You go from being the smartest guy in the room to actually the most effective guy. And that was really important. It took me about 6 to 9 months of coaching and changing and being willing to change to do that. And then my whole style changed. My whole leadership style changed. It became more about other people, less about me, helping get things done. And in the end, that general manager they had, who's a really good guy, he turned around and said, "You're doing really well." He goes, "I can't believe how well you're doing." And in fact, my performance was probably not as good as what it was in the first part of the year, but the perception of what I was doing and making in a broader context was suggesting that I'd grown and developed. And so that was a great reward for actually taking a step back and copping the lick and humbling myself and getting taught. So that was a significant change in my career. That 6 month period changed the whole trajectory. And it's hard. You see a lot of people go from being the smart technologist to a management role and they struggle because they don't do that transition where it's not about you anymore. It's actually about the outcomes in the team. And you've got to take that step back and help others get the outcome. And I found that really important. And I mentor a lot of people now over the years, trying to help them with the same kind of thing, saying, hey, you've got to let go. It's not about you. Find someone else to do that. People who are getting them to not have access to the systems anymore as they transition from the technologist to the manager. Little things like that. It scares the daylights out of them because their center of gravity is about what they know on the system. Getting them to actually be a people leader is very different, and a manager is very different.
Thanks so much for sharing. A completely different game, right? And how lucky that you had that manager that said, "Okay, maybe I made a mistake promoting you, but let's try. No, let's get you some help." And then clearly, you showed and you turn around, and now you're giving back, right? Mentoring people and helping them to realize that being a good technician, a good solution architect is not enough when you move up and you are leading people.
Well, his style was also to give you a little whack just to see how you'd respond as well. And I responded, and that, like I said, that 2 years I spent before my career, I was getting whacked all the time, and I became resilient. So it was actually a good thing to help me through that. But I still had to be humble and make the decision to change. Otherwise, I would have had to go somewhere else.
And a couple of things that you touched on, the managing up, right? Managing up, because sometimes when I do 360 with clients, sometimes you see a lot, you might be managing your team really well. Your team do actually love you, but not necessarily your peers or your your leader, right? So managing, all the way around, it's tricky, and perception plays a role, right?
Well, that's what happened in that scenario too. Like, the first part of the year, I was doing a good job with my team, but not up, and then had to change the lens a little bit. And that becomes easy when you put good people under you to take care of the team, so that you can then keep them going, manage a level above where you're managing before, instead of being so hands-on, and then helping to manage those above you that you need to influence more as opposed to manage. So that's really what I'd say: is you influence up, you manage down.
Fantastic. Okay, so Adam, you've been with some really large organizations, some big roles, and you are, in your current role as well, having a lot of responsibility, dealing with very complex systems and implementations. I was reading your recommendations on LinkedIn because it's something that I love doing. It gives a really good hint on people's strengths, and there are great comments there around you being a stand out as a people leader. Supporting your team to develop, and all the things that you kind of re-endorsing there with your stories, being open and fair, empowering teams, and being cool-headed under pressure, which is a very important trait as well. So what do you do, Adam, if anything, in a regular basis and also regular basis, to keep yourself, mentally, physically, emotionally,
Yeah.
socially healthy?
So the first thing I would say, I was thinking about this the other day. You've got to have something that's greater than your role that you believe in, right? That life is bigger than the role that you're doing at work. If you're locked into that's your life, you're going to be disappointed, because organizations are things, they're not people, and organizations don't have loyalty, and they don't actually develop you. People develop you, and scenarios develop you, but you can't trust that they're the end game. So the first thing I'd say is I have a view on there's greater things in life. There's family, I have my beliefs, there's all those sort of things. I also have some hobbies and things that I'm passionate about, and those hobbies happen to be physical. So I love sport. As you know, you get stressed in senior roles, and you need outlets. And if you don't have an outlet that you can sort of expand that energy, it can come out in negative ways. So, unfortunately, I love golf, because I find golf is one of the hardest things, but one of the greatest mental teachers. Um, the thing about golf is you can't be outcome focused, because it causes you to freeze up and make mistakes. You've got to go back to the process that works, and let the outcome take care of itself. And if you take that principle and apply it back to your work life or anything else, right, there's some outcomes you just got to have happen, right? So you get a bit more closer to it, but you've got to find what's the right process and trust it. And then when that goes off, find ways to mitigate the risks and the issues. So that's really important. But yeah, I make sure I spend plenty of time with family. Like I said, I have my beliefs, and I also play lots of sport, and I've got a dog that I spend time with. So there's got to be things that are more important than work in your life, or you're going to be very disappointed, and you'll feel the walls closing in when things go wrong at work because there's no outlet. So that's what I do. I have lots of different things. Plus, I love football. I love my sports and my football, and I love giving umpires a hard time on the weekend and stuff like that. So it's having that balance is really important. Making sure you've got time for your family, all those sorts of things. If you're too focused on work, it will get you in the end.
So true. Yes, when we see people that their identity is all around the role they play, at work, can be really painful, because things do change, right? Mergers and it restructures, and
Mm.
and yeah, stuff happens. Thanks, Adam. You mentioned golf, and I remember when we spoke last time as well. You mentioned something around soundboard and golf. I don't know if I'm mixing up the channels here, but also remember you talking about how when you ask for ask for a job and get it, and you're likely to get some advice, and ask for advice and likely to get a job. It's interesting. I never heard that quote before. And after you, I Googled it and it's like, yeah, okay. So that's really interesting. It's so true, right?
Yeah. In fact, the same person who told me he over promoted me years later when I was talking to him, he actually gave me that quote as well. I owe him too much of my career. I won't tell him that. So yeah, it's an interesting one because and ever since I heard that quote, I've found when people come to me and they're too forward in asking for work, I do point them somewhere else because no one likes to be trapped or to be pushed. And even in those situations, you don't want to commit. But if someone gives you a bit of room to come back and sort of sound them out and stuff like that and go, oh, here's an option. Maybe I can think of that. Yeah, it just seems to happen. I don't know why. It'd be interesting to see what other people who you talk to think about that. But yeah, I've found that if you ask for advice, you're more likely to get someone to go, here's an opportunity. But if you ask for a job, they'll give you advice. So yeah, it's an interesting one, that one.
Cool. Something else that I wanted to talk about is your background, Adam. So you worked in the retail private sector for so many years, right? Coles, some big names. No, you were there with the merge or acquisition, I should say, acquisition or merge of Kmart and Target, yeah, and of course ANZ.
Yeah, it's a department division for Wesfarmers. Yep, department stores.
Yeah. And of course, ANZ as well. And you've been with Victoria Service for a little while now. So the priorities of those two sectors are quite different, right? I mean, government space, citizen is your stakeholders predominantly are the citizen, you could say, and probably less focus on ROI or P&L, or how do you find, and you mentioned as well to me before that you love learning, different environments, having exposure, diverse exposure, which helps you to add more value, in business, realignment and so on. So yeah, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I left Target. I mean, at the end of the day, Target and Kmart and those sort of companies are run by Wesfarmers, who it's all about shareholder value, right? And so a lot of the decision making's around that. One of the things that was attractive to me, not about government, but about Service Victoria, is it was a startup, but to me, it was a marketplace of government services. And I'd just been in digital retail where every night you go to bed thinking about Amazon and all these marketplaces, right? Because they're coming and they're breathing down your neck, and that's where e-commerce was going to. So going to a startup within government that was its own admin office, that was its own organization, and it was a digital business that was going to be a marketplace of services, and the opportunity to grow. We had the opportunity to treat it like a business. So there was an opportunity for acquisition. And so you still had that kind of mentality of, okay, we've got to grow this organization, but it wasn't about revenue or return on shareholder value or anything like that. It was about how do we get the rest of government to invest in us so that we could grow and get services on there, reduce the cost to serve for citizens, make it easier for citizens. So the challenges there were different because they weren't about how do I grow revenue, but it was actually how do I get acquisition of citizens on services. And so some of the thinking was still the same. I think if I'd gone from a private organisation straight into a typical government department, I probably would have struggled a lot more because there's a huge paradigm difference, right? A lot of it's all about what does the minister want? What's the commitments to the government? And these things change a lot. In some ways, Service Victoria has been harder in some sense that because of the success we had during COVID, we started getting a lot of things coming and a lot of priorities changing. So there was a lot of change and attrition of projects and things like that. But the government side didn't really affect me so much because we were about acquisition, same kind of thing. When you're working in a private sector organization, you're probably not so much, as much as you should be customer focused and worried about the dollars, you're still building stuff to get to that outcome. So for us, we were still building stuff to get to that outcome. It's just that the priorities and the motivations were different. They weren't shareholder return, they're citizen return. You don't want to waste money. You've got ministers and you've got different departments wanting things to be able to do things. So from a technology perspective, we still had to build things fast, build it cheap, make it secure, make it run, make it good. And so those things were still the same. It's just the overriding decisions as to what you work on had different motivations. Now, COVID was the crisis that created the opportunity. We were able to move fast on that. And it didn't matter the reasoning. We just got to be able to get out and do that. So it is different though. Now that Service Victoria is much more as part of a department, I'm starting to see a lot more of the departmental government, private, public sector processes and policies coming over the top. And so that's a bit of a paradigm shift for me. It's teaching me a little bit more patience.
Which is always a good virtue to cultivate, right, Adam?
One which I struggle. I struggle with. My biggest challenge is that I'm very outcome focused.
Mhm.
And that's why golf's good for me, because it actually teaches me to focus on the process.
Slow down, slow
So,
down, right?
yeah.
When I was one of the management, consulting firms I worked in the past, I remember people used to say, as you climb up the ladder, the ball becomes smaller. So you start when you're a junior, you play soccer or footy, whatever, and then you go to tennis, and then eventually golf. It's as you become more senior. I think there is that kind of perception around golf, isn't it? Now, but I think it's a good training ground, literally. Cool. All right. So maybe let's shift to storytelling time. So as you know, Adam, the focus here in the Mindful CIO podcast is the non-technical aspects of tech leadership. So some of the themes that typically we cover are around, bringing people on the journey, to change, leading change, navigating change, or attracting, developing, and retaining talent, which is so hard nowadays. I hear getting buy-in from the board or drive innovation. So what story comes to mind that you'd like to share with the listeners around the non-technical aspects of being a tech executive, award-winning, CIO 50 multiple times in Australia?
Yeah, so there's a few stories. If I think about when I joined Target, the very week I joined Target, the CEO of Target announced that they were leaving Geelong and moving to Melbourne, and that anyone who wanted to leave could take a voluntary redundancy. My entire leadership team took the voluntary redundancy in my first week. And it wasn't me. Well, they told me it wasn't me. Some of them have been there for a while. And so that left me with the options of, do I have to go and recruit, or are there people there that I could develop? And I love to see people develop and grow. And so there was an opportunity there for me to, one, get fresh blood who had been there and were probably frustrated hitting the roof above them with people that had been in roles for a while, and also to develop them and spend time helping them grow and be a new type of leader, and also reshape the organization that I had. So I had the e-commerce platform and the store tech. And so there was a really good opportunity to go in and develop some people on the back of that. And I loved it. Both those two people who end up leading those areas have both gone on to do other things, and just the growth and the talent you see in them now. And it's not my fault. They had to do it, but the opportunity that they got, it was just a joy to be on that experience with them and help develop them and just steer them and coach them a little bit. We still delivered a lot of really good things as well. So that was a really, from a people leadership and opportunity, the crisis was created and the opportunity arose, right? So people left. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then I went around, and first thing I did whenever I get into crisis, and this is what I've found from studies I've done on myself, is I'll go to people. So that's what I did. I go to people and I look for the ones that I think, ask around and see what they think, get their feedback, and then try to identify the diamonds that haven't been exposed, and then expose them and get them out there and help them become leaders. So that was really important for me as part of that. So that was I often think back on that time and think, wow, that was amazing. And seeing those guys develop and the work we did in progressing that was important. So that's from a people development perspective. Another story I like to tell is at ANZ, there was I looked after credit card platforms. And before I looked after them, I was in architecture, and I was asked to do a strategy to do a global credit card platform for the region. They called it global, but it was actually for Asia Pacific. And we had a bunch of small businesses out in Asia who didn't want the big Australian guy coming in and taking over because they would lose their autonomy. And so we had to spend a lot of time traveling around those countries, convincing the CEOs of all these small banks that it was in their best interest to get on board. So I had to help convince, first of all, the person over the top of Asia, make sure that they're on board, get their support, and then go personally to visit all of these CEOs in Indonesia and Philippines and all over the place, Singapore, and Taiwan, when we eventually bought them, to help them see that this was in their best interest and that we would help them out. And then come back, put together a business case that would go all the way up to the top of the ANZ retail board, and they would support and go from there. We had a program called Glow Cards that took off. It was harder than we thought and tougher than we thought. We eventually did it though. We eventually moved them all on until ANZ went and sold some of those businesses off after I'd left. But along that journey as well, finding some really good people who could come in and take ownership of it. And in the end, as I moved up, they took my spot, taking global cards and running those things, and really talented people who the success was really on their shoulders once I sort of put them in and got going. We made a lot of mistakes, but we did a great job. And in the end, it was the first kind of global platform for ANZ when they wanted to be a super regional bank. Everyone sort of looked at that as what the blue chip kind of way they wanted to be. So that was something as well that was really good. And the importance for me on that was just stakeholder management, getting out, talking to people, listening to them, The strategy pack had 25 versions, and each of those versions was speaking to a different executive. So,
Wow.
and a lot of it was just the executive summary that they wanted something on, or they wanted an opinion, and you're placating these very high-powered banking executives from all around this region and saying, yeah, okay, yep, no, I get your point. And then by the time we actually went up to get the approval, the CIO at the time just completely rewrote the exec pack with 4 dot points and they all signed off on it. But the effort was in the conversations. It was getting out there and talking and talking and talking, listening, making them feel like they listened to, getting their advice, replaying it back. Took a long time, but in the end we got it done and that program got over the line. So that was a big lesson for me, that one. And I'm an impatient guy. I was sitting there going, would you just sign up? But yeah, and we had some really good support and really good sponsors as well. That's the other thing, is you've got to get a champion who is influential, and really get them to sponsor you. And don't be afraid to do that. Once you get them, make sure you get them to look after things and sponsor you through and take their advice. It's really important. If you don't have a sponsor, you're going to find it really hard to be successful.
Wow, what a remarkable story, Adam. And influence without authority, right? I mean, and I imagine how many dinners and lunches, right? How many conversations. And yeah, kudos to you. Interesting. The last event of the Mindful CIO community, the topic was the art of negotiation, and was really well received. Rick from Starbucks hosted us, so was really kind of him. And the next one I was planning to talk about in the Q2 this year. Persuasion and influence and persuasion. So I think you'll be a great guest speaker, by the sounds of it, because clearly you have, very solid experience in that space, and what a remarkable story. Good stuff. So moving forward to today, Adam, at Service Victoria, there's so much going on, right? I know cybersecurity, AI, top of the agendas every board, so much happening. What would you say that is a key challenge, or maybe a couple of top challenges that you face today?
There's a few. So everybody's talking about AI, right? I don't know if AI is a challenge, but it's an opportunity. The challenge is, how do you use it, especially in government, responsibly? Because when we talk AI, AI has been around for a while. We use AI at Service Victoria with our identity verification. So you can do your 100-point check online, right? So that's been around for years. But generative AI is a real opportunity, especially to reduce the staff-assisted services. So the more you can get people to do themselves and get accurate information and accurate advice is a real game changer for areas where you have large contact centers and things like that, where people respond to just informational questions. The challenge for government is there's a nervousness about exposing government things to people, and if you get it wrong, they don't like the risk. So we need to take our time in actually getting that right. So that's something around AI that's important, but there's a real opportunity for us. So we'll probably start more with, how do you help customer service operators get the right information using AI first and get that right before you expose that fully out there. Now, we have chatbots, which are kind of AI light, but to get one that's got generative AI, especially in the government space where you're giving someone government advice and things like that, you don't want any hallucinations happening on the government's AI tools, right? So it's a direction we'll go in. It's a real opportunity, but the challenge for us at the moment is getting to a point we're comfortable to use that. And so that's something that a lot of people are looking at internally within government. So that's important. The other big challenge is, for many years, the way government works is they generally don't build their own capabilities. They use partners, and so they'll get government funding as a package of money, and they'll bring a partner and they'll deliver it. And then if you've got too many partners, it gets hard to manage at a cost-effective rate all the technology you've got. So one of the things we're starting to look at Department of Government Services is, how do we bring that closer together? How do we consolidate and scale the cost of tech? Because government's really, you don't want to be spending all your taxpayer money on government tech. What you want to be doing is making it cheaper for government tech to provide services, so you don't have to charge as much revenue to do all those things, right? So government tech should be about making things cheaper for the state of Victoria and for citizens, making it easier. We've got a challenge. I think government federally as well would have the same challenges. All these large systems that have been around for a long time, how do you bring them in? How do you manage them easier? How do you consolidate? So that's going to be an ongoing challenge for government everywhere, I think. At Service Vic, our job has been, how do we get people to come through the one front door? So how do we get that marketplace of services? How do they have one account? They have everything there they need. They can go to the one app, all those bits and pieces. So we're continuing to drive that at the same time as there's some pretty big pieces of work in other departments, and you can't slow them down while you're trying to get that up and going. So they're probably the bigger challenges, I would think, that we're still dealing with at a time where money's at a premium, by the way, worldwide, not just in Victoria. So how do you do it without blowing the budget?
Thank you, Adam. And you touched on AI. When we talk about ownership, of AI in organizations, and I imagine our government probably, even more complex. What's your view on who should own, AI? Some people would say it's a merge, it's a business with, tech CEO or, the CIO, whatever that is. So what are your thoughts in terms of, ownership? And you mentioned responsibility, responsible use of AI. So what are your thoughts in terms of ownership,
It
Adam?
depends on what you mean about ownership. So what I would say is you probably want to have someone owning the governance and the rules and the policies around how you use AI. And then that could be from someone who maybe the CISO or someone like that who is much more on the security side or those sorts of things, or someone who's in a policy position around what they want to do. In terms of the implementations of AI, then absolutely the CIO or the relevant technology executive needs to be on the hook for that implementation of it. The data, what data is used, the security of it, how it's being done. We're very product centric on our side, so the product teams need to be across that sort of thing as to what do they want it to do and to what level they want it to go. But again, the implementations should be owned by the technology executives, but the governance and the policies, I think, should be owned somewhere else to make sure that there's no rogue CIOs running around trying to do something really cool that the government doesn't want to have done. I think that's an important difference between government and private sector in a lot of ways, other than a regulated private sector, is that there's a big policy arm that drives so much of what government does. So, we want to be customer centric, but there's still a policy arm which needs to be in place to protect government and protect citizens. And so that's really important that has an oversight, more so than probably you might get on a retailer who's just trying to get out there and drive revenue really quickly, and are probably being controlled more by ASIC or someone like that.
I see. Thank you. And I wonder if you reckon that policy focus role is the one to, in conjunction with the business, in conjunction with the CIO, CTO, to make sure that organizations adopting AI in a responsible, ethical manner, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, when you say ethical manner, there's so many elements to ethics when it comes to government, right? Ranging from privacy all the way through to accessibility, to First Nations, to all these sorts of things. So there's lots of different angles that it takes to get something done. If I think back to when we did the check-in app for Service Victoria during COVID, we built that in 5 or 6 weeks, but the privacy policy part of that took nearly 3 months. And that, I don't think we should ever apologize for that, because what we were trying to think about is the citizens' information and making sure that was done correctly, so that, because a lot of people started going, oh, they're getting more information, they're doing all this stuff. The reality is we weren't. We actually had a really well-designed, privacy in mind technology solution, but it had this strong policy overlay over the top. And that's what you'll find with government, is that we're not going to rush out and do something crazy. We're not going to go out and test the environment and think, oh, we got that wrong, bad luck, we're on 3 out, copying it. We're not going to do that. So we're going to actually make sure you got the right privacy and policy people. And there's obviously other third parties that look at government to make sure that we're doing things right as well. So that will be our approach.
Super. Glad to hear.
Some of the stories that were going on during COVID, I was driving my car going, oh, where are they getting this from? Like, because we actually designed it in such a way that no one could get the information, because it was all in different spots. And so, yeah, it was really interesting to hear what people were suggesting was happening to the reality of what was happening.
So shifting gears again, Adam, given that technology is a key business enabler, how do you see, or first of all, do you see that human-centric leadership can actually have a positive impact to, business bottom line or, business outcomes? And if so, how?
At the end of the day, good technology organizations are about the people, right? You can have the best technology. Technology moves at such a fast rate that if you don't have good people who help you get ahead of it, you're soon trailing behind, because someone else is going to leapfrog you. And so, especially in the private sector where it's competitive, once upon a time, CFOs saw technology as a line item that could be outsourced and moved offshore. Then digital became the whole part of the business. And so they realized, I need that onshore and I need that as part of the business. And it's about the people. It really is. So what I've found, like I said before, find the good people, develop them, make them part of the solution, listen to them, get them to help define it. They'll own it. Then a discretionary effort comes because they're owning it. And when the discretionary effort comes, the high performance follows. So that's something that I've found along the way. It's about the people. It's the people that will help you make the better technology decisions. It's the people that will help you come in and deliver things faster. It's the people that will come in and come up with the great ideas that you can't see. And so that's the sort of stuff that I've found time and time again. If I think about also the thing that motivates people, so Service Victoria, we're not a private sector organisation. We can't compete on some ways that they do, but the people who join are much more values driven. And so for them, it's about what they're building for, not necessarily trying to go out and race themselves up the career path. And they're all still really high performers, but just the loyalty that we have from a lot of the people here who are really high performers and really good and been here for a while, it's about them. And so helping them continue to grow and develop is essential. It's absolutely really important and essential for us to be successful.
Beautiful. Thanks, Adam. Leadership role models. So, with your long career, you've been around in different sectors, different industries. So, do you have like someone that maybe that person who helped you so much, but maybe it's a little bit of them, a little bit of someone else. So, do you have any public figures or anyone that you look up, like it's a bit of a reference for me in terms of leadership style or lessons or anything?
Instead of giving you a person, I'll give you a principle, right? And I'm going to use a dog as the version. So you're going to think, what's he talking? It's the end of the day, he must be feeling a bit funny. Years ago, we got a Maremma dog. We got two of them, and we didn't know what Maremmas were like. And if we'd known what they're like, we probably wouldn't have had them in the urban area. What you do with a Maremma is you take them as a puppy and you stick them out with a sheep, and they develop a relationship to the point that when they grow up and they become protectors of the herd, of the flock. And when the Maremma barks, the sheep follow. And so the sheep keep their eyes on the Maremma and they see the leader and they follow it. If you compare that to a Border Collie or a Blue Heeler, the Border Collie and the Blue Heeler, all the sheep care about is staying in front of the teeth and the bark, and they don't care what direction they're going because they're worried about what's behind them. So the fundamental leadership thing for me, and this goes back to a New Testament principle of the shepherd and the sheep herder. The sheep herder was paid just to take the sheep, didn't care what happened to them. The shepherd knew them. And it's the same with the Maremma versus the Border Collie. And to me, that's about the kind of leadership style I like. It takes longer to build the relationships of trust to get people to follow you. But once they do, it's easier to lead them than trying to manage them from behind. And that's a fundamentally important principle for me around leadership. So at the same time, as a leader, you can't get too close because you may have to sack them. That's the reality. You may have to make decisions they're not going to like. But at the same time, if you build it on common values and they see that you're trustworthy, that you have the vision, that you're trying to do the right things, then people's eyes will be looking up and going forward, not worrying about who's trying to bite them from behind. And that's the difference between poor management and good leadership. So that to me is the principle. And you can find it where I get that from and from my old beliefs and all these sort of things. But I love the story of the Maremma versus the Border Collie. And I love dogs, but to me, the concept of Maremma is just a beautiful dog that builds a relationship. You can put them with chickens, you can put them with penguins, and they build the relationship and they protect them and they follow them. And it's very different than the Border Collie and Blue Heeler, which are great managers and great working dogs, but the sheep don't like them. They just want to stay in front of them and they don't care where they go as long as they're in front of them. And so they lose their direction.
Wow, what a meaningful, perfect analogy, right? I mean, this is gold. Thanks, Adam. Lucky, I'm thinking about your mentees. Very lucky, right? To have you as a mentor.
Well, look, that's just a life principle I've learned. Whether I execute that as well as I would like is another thing. You have to ask my staff whether I do. But that's the principle I believe in, and that's the leadership style that I love, is about being the example that someone can follow. Yeah, at times when things aren't going well, you might have to get in and help get behind and carry people as well. But that's the principle. So when you talk, anyone who follows that kind of style is who I would look up to.
Beautiful. Adam, as we're about to wrap up, I often close with, we could just beautifully close with what, that metaphor, I think, but I usually close with the guest speaker sharing, top three or the number one tip to, for those who are listening to you, maybe we have some aspiring CIOs or maybe some established CIOs, but not, as senior as you, not with 3 awards behind, under the belt, being a CIO 50. Many CIOs that I actually work with, they aspire to be a CIO 50. So for those who are a little bit behind on their career journey, what would you say? I mean, I think you shared so much and just then right there, but any additional tips or advice on how to lead high-performing tech teams in a sustainable, mindful and sustainable way?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd do is know your business. and get everybody to align to the goals and understand what the business goals are, right? Because that gives them something to look for. And if they believe in it, if they don't believe in it, you give them the opportunity to get off. If they do believe in it, then you get them focused. The next thing is get organized and have good people around you. And the last thing is get the people around you to be part of the solution. So if I look at those 3 years I got nominated and into the CIO top 50, the reasons I got there wasn't because I was anything special. It's because I brought the people in and said, how do we solve these problems? And collectively we solved those problems, and I just got the credit. And the only reason I asked, we put me up, was to get Service Victoria's lights up there. But it was actually the team and the people who bought into that did it. And if I look at everything we've done, and even in all my career, it's about bringing the people on the journey. If you're a narcissist and it's about you, people see that very quickly and they drop off. And the discretionary effort drops off, the belief drops off. It's got to be about collectively, this is what we're after. How do we do it? You can't be a shrinking violet. You can't be pushed around. You've still got to be strong and stick to your guns, but it's got to be about bringing the team to help get the organizational goals delivered and get people who believe in them around you. And if they're good people, they should be knocking on the door to take your job as well, so that when you leave, one of them can take over. So that's it to me, is I guess the model that I would like to put forward and say that's how I've tried to do it as best I can.
Fantastic. Wow. Any final words, Adam, before we close? Anything else that is in your mind that perhaps you didn't have a chance to touch on that you'd like to share with the listeners?
No, thank you for the opportunity to listen to me and for the opportunity to talk. No, I think it's wonderful what you're doing, and it's important that people see that leadership is a behavior and management is a science. And so if you want to be a good leader and excel, it's about self-development and about who you are, and management's about what you do. So you've got to work just as much on yourself as learning the art forms or the science of the other stuff to be successful. And people see through people as well. So if you're not authentic and you're not who you are, people won't trust you, and therefore they won't follow you. Back to the Maremma story. So that's important as well. Brilliant.
Thanks so much, Adam. And thanks for being so, transparent, open, straightforward, not holding back anything, and many, practical advice you gave there. So I really appreciate. So thanks for your time, your energy. Best of luck with the role at Service Victoria, and look forward to have a follow-up chat in some time from now.
No worries. Thanks, Nat. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in and joining our discussion today. If you're learning from this podcast, please subscribe, give us a good rating, and share it with your friends. If you have any questions or suggestions about guests you'd like me to interview here in the Mindful CIO podcast, please share in the comments below. Last not least, thank you for your interest in the human side of tech leadership. See you in the next episode.